Good morning. Today I am going to be reading you one of my very favorite stories, and it's called The Making of a Knight by Patrick O'Brian. This book is about Sir James and how he earned his armor. So going through the different steps of becoming a knight. I am Sir James. I have come to fight for England. James burst into his father's room. His wooden sword slashed in the air before him. He imagined he would be wearing a suit of shining armor, traveling the countryside in search of adventure. "James," said his father, "put aside your sword. I need to talk to you." His father was a wise old knight, known through England for his bravery and his strength. "Now that you are 7 years old, it is time that you become a page in a great castle," James' father told him. "That means that one day, if you learn well and practice hard, you will become a knight, as I am. Then you will have real weapons and armor and will no longer need your sword of wood." One summer evening, soon afterwards, James' mother packed his belongings in a large wooden sack. Just before going to bed, James opened the sack and carefully hid his wooden sword inside. The next morning, James and his parents set off on horseback for the castle of Lord Hawkes. James had heard stories of the rich and powerful man, and now that he was going to live in his castle, he was both excited and a bit scared. On their journey, James's father passed through many small villages, all of which were on land owned by Lord Hawkes. The people who lived in these villages received his protection. In return, Lord Hawkes demanded a large part of their crops, their animals, and even the honey from the beehive. Upon the recommendation of James's father, Lord Hawkes made James a page in his castle. James was now on his way to becoming a knight. During his training, he learned to play music, read, and write. With the other pages of the castle, he practiced wrestling, archery, sword fighting, horsemanship. He and the other pages also served at the table during meals. In James's time, there was a book about good manners written especially for pages. It was called the Baby's Book. By reading it, James learned how to be polite and considerate. "Do not claw at your flesh or lean against a post in the presence of your lord. Whether you spit near or far, hold your hand before your mouth to hide it. And keep from picking your nose, your teeth, or your nails at mealtime." One day, James was practicing archery with the other pages when suddenly he heard a loud trumpet blast. Someone shouted, "The king approaches!" As the page watched, the King of England rode slowly towards the castles on his stately charger. Accompanied by the queen and escorted by nobles, servants, and soldiers, the castle servants quickly hung large, colorful banners from the top of the walls. With a clatter of hooves and the blare of trumpets, the royal procession rode into the courtyard to the cheers of the crowd. Later that day, a grand feast was held in honor of the king. The cooks prepared their fanciest, most exotic dishes. The guests ate from wooden plates shared between two people. No one in England used forks in those days, so the guests ate with a knife, a spoon, and their fingers. James and the other pages of the castle served the meals. They also carried a bowl of water and a towel so that the guests could wash their hands between courses. This is a dog that's eating the scraps. And this pie came with dessert. Small live birds were put in the pie tin and covered with a cooked pie crust. When it was time, the pie was cut open at the table and the birds would fly out. Inspired by the king's noble knights, James was more determined than ever to make his dream of knighthood come true. When no one was looking, he liked to explore the armor closet. After the king's departure, life in the castle returned to normal. As the years passed, James continued his training, which included learning chivalry from the ladies of the castle. Chivalry was the system of beliefs about how a knight should act. Lady Allison often said, "A chivalrous knight is honorable, truthful, and loyal. He is kind and generous to anyone in need, and he is always merciful and fair, even to his enemies. A knight also is courteous and gentle towards the ladies. If he liked a particular lady and wanted to win her heart, he composed poems and songs of love for her. He also performed brave deeds in her honor." On James's 14th birthday, Lord Hawkes said to him, "Congratulations, James, you have learned well, and today you will be made a squire. Well done." This was the next step towards knighthood. As a squire, James would serve a knight of the castle, care for his weapons and armor, and do chores for him. He would even sleep beside the knight's bed at night. James was made a squire to a brave and powerful knight named Sir Thomas of Hammersmith. At first, James was a little afraid of Sir Thomas, who at times could be gruff and intimidating. However, the knight was very kind in his own way. "If you pay attention to all I have to teach you," said Sir Thomas, "you will become a great knight like your father and like me." One of James's duties as a squire was to care for Sir Thomas's horses. A knight had several horses, and each was used for a different purpose. Sir Thomas had a large, strong horse that he rode for battle. This horse was Sir Thomas's used for jousting and was a powerful horse. Sir Thomas also had a fast horse called a courser, and he had a well-mannered, easy-paced horse that Sir Thomas would use for traveling. James also learned about the art of falconry or hawking. The nobles of the castle used trained falcons, a type of hawk, to hunt for small animals and birds. The nobles dressed in their finest clothes and sometimes went out for several days on horseback. When the game was spotted, a falcon was released. It swooped down, caught its prey, and then brought it back to the hunters. Many nobles treated their favorite falcon as a pet and carried the bird around on their arm when they went visiting. A leather hood was placed on the falcon's head. This kept it calm until the moment you wanted it to hunt. James made friends with the puppy on the hunt and named him Cedric. From then on, James always had Cedric by his side. James, the armorer, had finished making my new helmet, said Sir Thomas one day. "I need you to fetch it for me." Inside the hot, noisy armorer's workshop, several craftsmen were hammering and bending sheets of metal, shaping the various pieces of a suit of armor. The armorer explained to James, "Each suit of armor is especially made to fit a different knight, and I know the size of every piece for each knight in this castle. Different types of armor had to be made for various activities. Battle armor for wartime, jousting armor for tournaments, and parade armor just for showing off." And here's the different armors. This is what knights would wear in the 1200s, about 200 years before James was born. There was no metal plates, but knights were fairly well protected by the suit of mail that was made out of thousands of small interlocking mail rings. By the 1400s, in James's time, knights were entirely covered by metal. These suits of armor usually weighed about 60 pounds, but were easy to move around in than you might think. They could get hot and uncomfortable, though, especially on a long ride in the summer. This is called a pig-faced, and this was used in battle. This was a frogged mouth helm, and it was only used for jousting. And this is a kind of helmet that was used to show off. As a squire, James had to keep Sir Thomas's weapons in perfect shape. He also began to acquire his own. Mastering them was difficult but necessary. As a knight, James's life would depend on his skills. A knight's favorite weapon was his sword. He often gave it a name and would kiss it for good luck in battle. He also had a long, second, bigger sword called a hand and a half sword. Sometimes they would use one hand to swing, and sometimes they would need two. This long one was a lance, and knights held it out in front of him while charging another knight on horseback. The lance knocked the enemy off of his horse, perhaps even piercing his armor and killing him. This is called a mace. A mighty blow from a mace could dent a helmet and seriously injure an enemy. And knights sometimes used pole axes and war hammers, and these were very deadly. James was now 19, very close to knighthood. He had learned much, but had yet to experience a real battle. James' chance came one summer morning when a band of enemy knights appeared on the horizon. The castle's heavy iron gates creaked open, and the colorful procession of armed knights and their squires rode out to meet the enemy. James is putting on the knight's armor and took a long time because of all the buckles, straps, hinges that they would have to piece together. The squires were not involved in the actual fighting. They cared for the weapons, supplies, and extra horses, while the knights cut and slashed on the field of battle. As James watched a powerful blow from his enemy's lance, knocking Sir Thomas from his horse and broke his arm, James boldly rushed into the fury of the battle and dragged Sir Thomas to safety. As the sun went down, a few enemy knights who had survived retreated in shame. Battered and bruised, Lord Hawkeye's knights returned to the castle in victory. At last, when James turned 21, he was ready for knighthood. He was careful to follow the traditional rituals before the ceremony. He had a long bath to symbolize cleansing his soul. He then had shaved his beard and cut his hair. He spent the night in the church thinking about the responsibilities of knighthood. In the morning, he entered the great hall where a large crowd was gathered. His proud mother and father were standing right in front. Lord Hawkes made James a knight by lightly striking him on the shoulder with a sword, saying, "I dub thee knight, be loyal, brave, and true." Then Lord and Lady Hawkes strapped James's sword and belt on his waist, buckled golden spurs to his ankles. He was now Sir James, the newest knight in the castle. Sir James was just getting used to his new armor when a traveling knight approached the castle gates. "If there is any knight in the castle who is brave of heart and strong of arm, let him come forth and joust with me," he challenged. Sir James rushed for his lance and armor and rode out to meet the challenger. In a grassy field outside the castle, a small crowd gathered to watch Sir James and the other knights as they charged at each other. With a mighty crash, Sir James splintered his stout lance against the other's shield. With new lances, they lined up again and charged. This time, Sir James was knocked roughly to the ground. Sir James had lost the joust. According to the rules, he had to give his armor and his horse to the winter, but as a gesture of chivalry, the victorious knight refused to accept them, saying, "Keep them, young knight. It seems your need for them is greater than my own." Sir James had noticed a beautiful young noblewoman in the crowd watching the joust. Her name was Catherine, and she was new to the castle. Much taken by her beauty, Sir James began to write love poems and songs for her. Catherine promised to return his love if he acted with chivalry and performed valiant deeds in her honor. She gave him her scarf and said, "Tie this around your arm when you joust to show that you act in my name. In this way, you will win my heart." Later that summer, Lord Hawkes sent his heralds far and wide with an important announcement. "A tournament will be held at the castle in the next month." This series of warlike games was held in a fenced area called the lists, where knights fought one another to show off their strength and skill. People came from miles around to watch the spectacle. The most exciting part of the tournament was the melee, where large groups of knights fought in teams, such like a real battle. The melee was good practice for a real war, but sometimes tempers got hot. So it was not just for sport anymore. It was for real. A squire helps his defeated master. The most important part of the tournament was the joust. Sir Everest, a famous warrior, announced, "Any knight who defeats me at the joust shall win my finest shining armor. But if he loses, I shall wear his armor in my next match." 3 knights had already fallen when Sir James had his chance. On the first charge, both Sir Everest and Sir James shattered their lances. The next charge, Sir James's lance held, and Sir Everest was lifted from his horse and thrown to the ground. With Catherine's scarf waving from his arm, Sir James was declared the winner. Now that Sir James had proven himself as a knight, he needed his own squire. There was a page at the castle named Robert who had a talent for swordplay, and Sir James made him his squire. At first, Robert was a little afraid of the mighty knight who had won the joust at the tournament, but he felt honored to be his squire. After a few years serving Lord Hawkes at the castle, Sir James decided to set off in search of adventure and fortune, becoming a knight. He said goodbye to Catherine, promising to see her upon his return. As the gate of the castle creaked open, Sir James rode out proudly, with Robert following closely behind. Packed deep in his bag, beneath the armor and the mail, beneath the warm coats and Catherine's scarf, was a little wooden sword. Wearing his finest suit of shining armor, Sir James rode off to a new life of adventure. The end. I hope you enjoyed The Making of a Knight.